acronyms. Hey everybody, welcome. Right now we're talking about why Slack is named Slack. Supposedly it's an acronym. I didn't know that, but Jeremy alluded to that fact. And then I remember things like, looks like the medical imaging, not a scan.
CT scan.
No, when you get not an x-ray. Anyways, all these different words that just like have acronyms for the sake of acronyms. You're just like, now it becomes...
EVSE is another one. Speaking of EV charging.
Totally. Like, what are these acronyms? Well, hey everybody, like come on in, come to the front. We don't bite. We're here for a good time, and not really a long time, but we're excited to talk to you guys about everything about EV charging. And without really further ado, I'll quickly kick it off. 101. My name's Greg. I'm the head of marketing here at Switch. I'm joined with me. We got Jeremy. We've got Thomas. You'll hear more from them for the rest of the conversation. I'm here for housekeeping. This is recorded. We'll send you a link afterwards if any of your teammates missed it or otherwise. Happy to connect with you otherwise. But without further ado, I'm going to pass this over. Use the chat on the side. Any questions, you fire it in. Thomas and Jeremy see the chat. They'll probably answer your questions in flow. If not, we'll get to them at the end. But this is a conversation. Feel free to pipe in. They'll pipe back. And looking forward to chatting about all things EV charging. I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Greg. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining our Effortless EV Charging for Your Property. Jeremy Cohen, Director of Real Estate Partnerships here at Switch. My role in the organization is to work with developers and owners and operators across the country to help them with their EV charging strategy. I'm joined by Thomas Martin, our Director of Sales Engineering, and we got a jam-packed agenda for you all today. I'm going to do some high-level overview about EV charging and the different options available. And then Thomas is going to take a deep dive on all things technical aspects of EV charging and what creates a great ecosystem. We'll wrap it all up with any available incentives, rebates, the path forward. You'll hear that a lot today, something we call the plan, install, manage, and service end. And then we'll wrap it up with some questions also. So feel free, like Greg said, fire away in the chat. We'll be sure to answer it. And let's get going. So Thomas, the summary.
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. And we opened up joking about acronyms, but as many of you know in the industry, EV charging loves their acronyms. So hopefully we won't confuse many of you today with our use of them. We're going to try and run pretty quick, and with a goal of touching on a number of topics. And based on the questions you write in the chat as we go, will give me a cue for how deep we want to go into certain topics. And so as we're talking, if you want more information or go a level deeper, write that in the chat. Hey, Thomas, go a level deeper on load management, for example. I can certainly do that. As you can understand, we got a lot of information to cover, and I want to be conscious of everyone's time. We're not going to run the full 45 minutes. Jeremy and I are going to try and keep it to about 25 or 30, and then leaving some room for questions at the end. So let's dive in. So Jeremy, talk us through a little bit about Switch and who we are and where we come from.
Yeah, for some of you who've joined the webinar who are unfamiliar with Switch, Switch is an EV charging solutions company. We have over 18,000 chargers out there across North America, so it's Canada and the US, with a remarkable uptime of 99.7%. We take great pride in this, and we're very fortunate for some of the clients who trust us with this incredible asset. You know, some of the top names in multifamily and commercial real estate, we provide the EV chargers to. So you're going to hear a lot about this today. We call it our roadmap, our plan. So for some of the novices on the call, where do you even begin, right? Some multifamily owners, operators haven't put in EV chargers yet, and they ask us, we want to get this going. What do we do? So the design stage, right? Designing, we're going to quote. So it all starts with electrical contractors coming to site, looking at the property. We need to understand the actual layout. So is this a garage? Is this a surface lot? What kind of asset are we working with? And what's the setup? We need to get a quote for that installation, right? Eventually, after we get our quote, we're going to make sure we have EV charging hardware in that quote, EV charging software in that quote, and the cost to install as well. And after these chargers are installed and they're up and running, we want to manage them. I joke the EV chargers are essentially a outlet with software, but it really stems much further if you're an owner and operator who's looking to recoup revenue and actually start to monetize, this asset, which is an EV charger. So we'll dive more into that later. So why now? I mean, I'm sure everyone on the call is either in the EV charging industry, interested in putting EV chargers in there. For some that are unfamiliar, the EV sales are projected to hit about 53% of all cars in 2030. The train has left the station, right? So long gone are the days where, the EVs were kind of a nice to have. Now some groups are saying it's a must have. Certain demographic of individuals are buying it. And also those individuals are looking to charge up at home or at work. So the stat is 80% of that charging is happening at home or at work. Now, not everyone lives in a single family home, and a lot of people live in dense urban areas. So we need to make sure that these people's needs are also satisfied as well, or else the EV adoption train will slowly start to slow down. And we're going to hit you guys with a lot of stats throughout this presentation as well. We think it resonates the most. One thing I alluded to when we first started was the active incentive program. So a lot of groups, are interested in adding EV chargers, but, understandably so, they don't want to break the bank adding them. There are some incredible incentive programs that are all throughout North America where you can offset the cost of installation. So whether that be a municipality, state, city, utility, we'll dive into that in a little bit as well. Just know that there are options to offset some of this CapEx. So the plan, right? These are key questions to consider when you're starting to look at your EV charging project holistically. What Thomas and I did also was we wanted to include a lot of questions that we typically hear out in the field, so that way it just would resonate most. So this is one of the biggest questions that we hear for groups that have never added EV chargers before, and it's what type of chargers are available, or what type of do I need? Well, that's a very broad question and can be broken down into a few different buckets.
And we like to include this topic just to level set everybody to make sure that as we progress through the conversation with a property, we're not losing anybody along the way. So I'm sure if most of you are joining this webinar, you're familiar with the terms level 1, level 2, and DC fast charging. But just to level set, level 1 would be equivalent to plugging your car into the outlet in your wall. It's accessible, but it's going to allow you to plug in virtually everywhere. Whereas level 2 is where we really see the real workhorse of the industry. Level 2 represents 90+% of ports in the field. And this is because it strikes the balance between the economics as well as performance with the vehicle. This is going to charge your car in 4 to 6 hours on average. And this is where we see demand being generated because the charging time matches the dwell time of the drivers at a property. Think workplace, think condominium, think, your typical spot where you would spend a few hours. Versus if you're on a road trip, or if you need to charge quick, DC fast is where you're going to be looking. And there's a reason we don't see these in every parking lot. It's just simply because cost to install and cost of infrastructure. In a perfect world, we can charge your car in 20 minutes, but that's going to be very taxing on the local infrastructure. So the price point doesn't necessarily match the use case, and hence we see level 2 being very common.
One of the other questions that we typically get asked from groups are, how many chargers should I install? And it doesn't really come down to how many should you install. It really comes down to how many can you install. So as we kind of go about the conversation, you're taking into account multiple things, right? We're taking into account the amount of EV cars that are going to either be at your asset or on the road, which are only growing. Also surveying the tenants. A lot of groups don't even engage the tenants. You have kind of a use case and a data set that is just sitting in your parking lot right there. So send out the survey monkey, see how many people have EV cars, how likely are they to buy EV cars. If you don't have EV chargers at your property now, and if you were to put them in, they're likely going to use them. And ensure you're actually counting the number of chargers in your lot. But then you have that conversation of, well, how many can you realistically install? So you may have a lot of EV cars, but how many chargers can you actually install at the property? That is a whole nother conversation that we're going to dive into right now, which some people on the call may be more versed to than others in terms of electrical capacity at the building level. So outside of electrical capacity, you're surveying the lot for the amount of, EVs in your lot. You're talking about budget, right? At the end of the day, the building is an asset. Adding EV chargers could be CapEx heavy. So what you need to understand is how much available capital do you have on hand and how much are you willing to deploy into this given project? Some groups look at this totally differently than others. Some want an immediate payback. How quickly can they recoup their capital after these chargers are installed? There's another conversation of looking at this project as an OpEx versus a CapEx, and then offsetting any installation and hardware and software costs with available incentives and rebates that are out there as well.
So we've kind of given you the lay of the land. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the solution side of the EV charging conversation. And one of the places we like to start from the perspective of the buyer is, can I just buy any EV charger, install it, and allow them to start charging? Well, the answer is yes, but you're going to want to think through, what are the consequences of just installing a free plug at my property? And the answer is, you might get some unintended consequences. And so the 4 pillars of the solution is how we like to break down the 4 areas that you want to think through what happens once the chargers are installed. And so we're going to dive through each one to kind of build the full picture. So we're going to start with the EV chargers and infrastructure themselves. This is what most people are looking for, and this is what people think about when they hear EV charging. So what should I look for when purchasing a charger? So generally speaking, the hardware is a commodity from the perspective of level 2. Gone are the days where there's major differentiators between the hardware. And so we're mainly just looking to provide the building with something that allows the asset to be protected long-term against vendor lock-in. And the reason for that is, if you go on Google and type in EV charging, you will find stories of EV charging companies that have simply stopped servicing some ports or packed their business and moved elsewhere. In order to avoid this, as an industry, we're trying to promote the use of open standards, OCPP to be specific, and this protects the asset against vendor lock-in, as well as keeps the service and technology competitive. You can think of it like the telecom space. Back when we all had cell phones locked into carriers, they knew they had us for the full lifetime of the contract, and in a lot of cases, the service suffered. But now that we all have unlocked cell phones, we can move our devices between Verizon, AT&T, Bell, Rogers freely without having to purchase new hardware. Same goes with EV chargers. If for whatever reason your current provider increases their rates, doesn't provide the service they promised, if you're not using the open standard OCPP, you are locked into that vendor and you would have to replace the hardware, which can get expensive very quickly. So just to summarize, by the use of adopting OCPP as the framework for the chargers, you're effectively operating your chargers like you would a telecom modem. You can call the next company and they can come take over with very minimal cost. So protecting the asset is the main hardware benefit here. That being said, we work with a lot of the big brands. This is just a very short list. The list is probably 30 different manufacturers at this point. Some big manufacturers, Siemens, ABB, the ones you recognize, and some that white label. And so what considerations are needed in addition to the EV chargers? And so, yes, we have the charger, but what we're really doing here is putting in a plug, and we want to think about how we manage the physical parking space. So the EV chargers, how do we support them? This, little picture here shows that cable management in bollards is a great way to keep the parking lot neat and tidy. We see plenty of EV chargers in the wild without cable management. You end up with parking lot spaghetti, and sooner or later, after the cable's been run over either by a car or a snowplow, you got to replace it, and that's a service call, and that adds cost to the overall operation. So we like to promote the use of clean and tidy upkeep on the property, as it also reflects the upkeep of the property itself. We want to think through, where is the electrical service in relation to the EV chargers. This is often one of the biggest driving costs, is the proximity between the electrical service and the EV charger. So if we're in an underground parking garage, do we have the luxury of putting the EV charging spaces close to the electrical supply rather than in the furthest spot? Another consideration is internet, especially for condominiums where we're putting EV chargers in the underground parking garage. Getting internet to these devices to allow metering and billing can be difficult. So we're going to want to think through that. And at Switch, we provide the full turnkey internet service to the building. So it's our hardware, we operate it, and we're responsible to keep it online in the event of an issue. So that's one benefit of working with Switch. And then finally, the software. But rather than including it in the EV charger hardware conversation, we're going to introduce the second pillar of the solution, which is what we call the management side. So the chargers are installed. Now what? How do we manage this without allocating new resources to this operation? And so the question we want to ask ourselves is, why do I need software to manage these other words, large electrical outlets? Well, you don't, but first you're going to want to ask yourself the following questions. Who can have access to these chargers? Is it just anybody? Or do I want to have closed access to a certain group of people? How do I know how much revenue I've generated? How do I keep track? How does the driver pay for the electricity that they would be consuming? What if all of the chargers are on at the same time? Are there any electrical problems that I need to be aware of? What if the driver leaves their car in the EV charging spot? How do I enforce this, right? I mentioned earlier, operating the space can be difficult. And then finally, how do I know if something breaks? The answer to this is software. This is why it exists, is so that you can bring EV charging as a service to your property without having to allocate additional resources to manage it. And so the idea is that the software management platform is going to take care of all of this for you. And so at Switch, we have our solution. We call it Switch Portal, but basically this is a passive tool that you're going to use to set up the site and check in on it every couple of months, just to make sure the user behavior matches what you intend. I mentioned earlier, how do I know if someone leaves their car in the parking spot? This is where loitering enforcement comes into play. We see it being used in a lot of high traffic zones where you want to maximize the asset. So you want to make sure people charge their car and move on. And so we charge people by the minute once their car is full. And so the full suite of solutions here is meant to make operating EV charging at the property as easy as possible while remaining a high fidelity service. So Jeremy, this question comes from your side of the conversation, which is usually budget. But you can attest to this. We get a lot of customers that come to us and just simply say, we can't afford hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring EV charging to the building. So what do we do? The answer is we have a tool for that. But first, we like to start from kind of grassroots. How big are we talking in the 3-year time frame, 5-year, and long term? Because we can get chargers in the building quick, but we may want to consider the future of EV charging in the building to see if we can, batch in some work, oversize, and plan for the future. And so the goal here is meet that demand while not breaking the bank. And so I want to introduce the concept of energy management. And so if anybody's on the electrical side, this is probably going to be one of your key takeaways from today's presentation, is just how do we add more load to a building without putting it into the red zone, so to speak, beyond what the building is capable of. And so energy management, load management, these are all terms used in the industry, but basically this is a term used that describes controlling when EV charging happens. And so in this case, in the use of a multi-unit residential building, if everyone comes home and plugs in, the EV charging peak is going to coincide with the building's peak. And this can get expensive very quickly, one, from an infrastructure perspective, but two, just from a demand charge perspective. So how do we deal with that? I have a nice little animation here that it's gonna play for us. So as we add EV charging one by one to a building, right? They all don't go in right away, but one by one, they're going to slowly bring the building closer to its peaks. And so if we don't have a handle on when charging happens, things can get expensive. And I'll just quickly replay that to show you what happens. And so the idea for a lot of buildings, we want to make use of the times where there is excess load available to us. In almost every building, there is plenty of time where there's excess capacity available to us. So we just need to have the necessary functions in place to make sure the EV chargers understand when they can charge at full speed versus throttling back to ease off the load on the building. And so we're going to get a little bit more technical here. And if you guys want to go deep, I certainly can do so. How do we wire this up? So from an electrical standpoint, when our electricians are going in and quoting this software or quoting this solution, they're going to want to think about, how do I practically wire it into the building to be efficient? And so I give two examples here. We have circuit sharing and panel sharing. Circuit sharing is when you use one circuit for a group of chargers. This is pretty common amongst pretty much all the manufacturers and charging companies in North America. Same with dedicated circuits, where you have a group of chargers share a dedicated panel. These are all great solutions, but they don't cover all the use cases. So what else can we do to layer over top of this to go a step further? And this is where we introduce real-time load readings by adding sensors on different points in the building's electrical infrastructure to give us a real-time readout of what's happening. And so in this first example here on the left, you can see that this little CT sensor will tell us what the lights in HVAC and other loads are doing, so that we can tell the EV chargers to temporarily throttle down to provide some relief, or that there's plenty of capacity available to us and we can charge all of the vehicles at full speed. And so I want to highlight, the goal here is not to charge vehicles slow. It's to very delicately throttle back when certain points in the building are under electrical stress. And the data shows us these are only for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time. And so I like to think of it more of an insurance policy than it is a throttling down on the regular. We could even take this a step further and provide sensors on the main building distribution so that we can get a picture of the overall building performance and performs certain performance criteria within that. What I mean by that is, if we know the building's going through its peak consumption at 6 p.m., maybe we dial back EV charging a little bit just to save on the demand charges. And so across all of our portfolios, whether it's large national portfolios or single buildings that are privately owned, all of these tools are geared towards getting EV charging in today, as well as laying the necessary groundwork to scale in the future. So I'm going to pause there. I saw we had a few questions. So maybe, Jeremy, if I take a minute, I can read some of those.
Yeah, no, take a good breather, Thomas. You were on an awesome autopilot for a bit. I was monitoring the chat. Yeah. Paul was asking, while the chargers are OCPP, is your software programming locked? Is it configured remotely by you, or does the installer have full access to it?
Yeah, so our software is created by us, but it is not locked in the sense that if you purchase a charger from us and we install it and we operate our services in your building, if for whatever reason you're not satisfied with either our rates or our service, you can call up another company and migrate that charger to their network. You would terminate our service. It's in the agreement. We give you a clause. And you would not have to spend any money on migrating that charger because that charger is on the open protocol. And that's the benefit. It holds us accountable to our service, as well as it keeps the asset future-proof.
Excellent. And John from Parking Whisperer was saying he's got a client with some switch units that have never been turned on. So he's looking for the deck and how we can help them out and get them going. So John, we'll have one of the team members from Toronto reach out.
Okay, so we talked technology. Let's talk through the lens of the EV driver. What does it look like if you're an EV driver in a building that has switch chargers? And so what you need as an driver is basically three things. You need to be able to use them and a method to use them. You need to be able to pay for the electricity that they're using. And you need to have someone to call and get you help when needed. These chargers, just like any other service, sometimes they break. So you want to get help. And we're the service to deliver that. And so to access the driver, just like many other companies in the industry, they can use a mobile app, but they can also use a web app, which is just simply scanning a QR code. So you don't have to be an account holder. You can just scan the QR code and check out as a guest, just like any other online retailer. Or if you're a repeat customer, let's say we have chargers at your workplace or your condo, you could request an RFID card just so you can tap it on the machine each time. So how do EV drivers pay for electricity? From the perspective of a property manager, Switch is holding the responsibility of collecting the money from the drivers, and then on a monthly basis, depositing that to the building. So you can think of us just like a sub-metering account in that case. This is all automated in the account setup. You basically just give us the direct deposit bank account and we deposit the money right into it. And so, Jeremy, we maybe let's have him take a minute here and talk through how does EV charging interact with other technologies in the building. I know we're flying here and just trying to keep us on track. But do you want to maybe talk through the flash parking integration and just maybe how we offer services beyond just EV charging?
Absolutely. I would say one of the coolest things about being a software company is our ability to integrate with other, we'll say, smart parking applications, property management system applications, anywhere where residents are residing within these buildings, and of course, exposed to other, just apps. And one of the biggest things we hear is app fatigue. So I joke, I say that Switch doesn't have an ego. We're happy to just be in the background, letting these other programs and platforms be the lead. So we just wanted to highlight a few for you because we don't necessarily know who's on the call, but maybe this would resonate to just being outside of just a traditional EV charger. So Flash Parking is a parking application, and we have a shared client in Ani Group, and they essentially said, what would be great is if we can integrate Switch and Flash to make it very easy for the resident experience, billing applications, drivers come in and out of the garages, and it's kind of just a seamless, no touch, no friction operation for the property, the parking operator, and obviously the EV charging operator as well.
And I think the way we see it, Jeremy, and is we don't want to be yet another app that the building has to learn and be trained on. We want to be able to integrate with what they know. And a lot of our big portfolio customers know the flash parking solution. And so rather than adopting a new technology that they have to maintain, they just have to maintain their flash parking training and service, and EV charging fits within that. Same applies with some smart concierge services like Smart One and in-close parking. So a lot of buildings these days are being built and designed with the use of, smart community platforms that allow you to, open your locker for an Amazon package, book an amenity, navigate guest parking, unlock doors. Same applies here. If a building's on a Smart One contract or they use their platform, you can also start your EV charging native to that app. And so there's a number of other platforms, and Jeremy and I are happy to look into compatibility if you are interested. And then finally, another one we like to promote is our integration with CSC ServiceWorks. They're a large national laundry company, and that operates, I think, over 200,000 buildings. And you can access and pay for Switch charging with the CSC app. So Jeremy, maybe you want to take us through O&M support. I know we're getting close on time here. So how do we support these units in the field? Maybe walk us through that.
Yeah. One of the things I speak about with our clients is this is all great, all said and done, but you just want the chargers to work. That's all anyone cares about. It's uptime. It's making sure that once you purchase and you've invested the funds in this, that you just want it to work just like any other amenity or anything else that you add at the property. So it's all about being reliable and knowing that you have an ongoing service and maintenance plan. And there's just a couple ways to go about it. So, at Switch, we're very fortunate. We just offer a care package, we call it, where we're essentially bundling the hardware and the software, installation and labor. So that way, if an event were to happen, you're covered. The Switch software is covering you 24/7, 365. I would say 95% of any related call that we get for level 2 devices at multi-tenant families at multi-tenant properties can be handled remotely via the software. There are those 5-7%, we call it acts of God, where you need someone to go out on site and to handle it. Maybe someone accidentally backed up into the charger or someone clipped a cord. Super unfortunate, but just know that we can easily remedy those problems as well. So you just want peace of mind. And the path forward. I mean, we spoke at great lengths, Thomas, right? Like we had so many different buckets here of just how to go about it, right? That the whole plan, install, manage, and service. I mean, I think we probably spent 30 minutes on the actual plan, the install, and the manage. And really, at the end of the day, it's about servicing the client, right? Knowing that once you get these chargers in the ground, that they are up and running, they're on the network. Owners and operators have that dashboard to see how these chargers are performing across a given property or across an entire portfolio. So it's a bunch of different buckets, but just knowing that can be handled very, very easily. One of the questions I think we got was surrounding the rebate programs, and it was great timing. So there are still a ton of active level 2 incentive programs available. A lot of them really driven by the utility companies, which is encouraging. So we just whipped together a small chart. As you can see, California has just been the leader for so many years, but there's so many other states that are super bullish on making this happen. And maybe the incentive programs aren't as juicy and lucrative as they might have been maybe a year or two ago. They're still active. And, at Switch, we are helpful, and we would love to help you furnish them, because it's a lot to go into it. It's paperwork, it's coordination, getting pre-approvals, but just know that the money is still out there and you want to grab with both hands before the well runs dry. We don't know what the future holds, so we want to take advantage of the now. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's how many chargers should you install versus how many could you install. Take full advantage of what the utility is giving you and install as many as you can. But as you can see, there was a lot of level 2 over there. So I hope that answers one of the questions. Wow, 133. Thomas, that was good.
We're on time today.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at some of the questions in the chat. Now's your time to type a question in. We've got about 15 minutes. So if you want to type your question in, we can answer it live. So I'm going to go through here one by one. Does Switch manage the repairs and maintenance of the charger as well? Yes, we do. And this ties into your second question, Brecken, about the care package. Yes, it is in addition to the cost of processing the energy costs. And so we would just bill that on an annual rate. Think of us like a service company. You can pay extra for a little bit of extra service that's included, so that the building knows what they're going to be spending each year on the EV charging installation. Alex, do you touch on carbon credits? Yes, we do have an internal team that processes these. And so if you are working with Switch, you can assume all of the charging that happens on your property and the paperwork associated with carbon credits will be handled by us. Generic load management solutions, can they integrate with your system? For example, managing a sauna in a private townhouse that is part of a complex using Switch system. Yes, there's a number of ways that it can happen. Believe it or not, the townhouse scenario is usually where we see it get complex, because you might have power coming from the unit, but you want to take into account the amenity loads, for example. The short answer is yes, you can put those CT clamps that I showed on screen at different points in the electrical system to know where is your bottleneck, and let's monitor the bottleneck to tell us when to, dial up or down charging. And so the starting point there is usually looking at the electrical SLDs, the drawings, and that'll give us an indication of where our constraint points are. To John's question, yes, we are in the US. Our business is split between the US and Canada. US is the dominant side of the business, as you can imagine. So yeah, more than welcome to service buildings down there. Jeremy, off the top of your head, are you able to talk through just like how we price out care and how that works?
Yeah, care fluctuates in terms of a private setting or a public setting, but it's fairly nominal. I believe it's anywhere between like $15 or $20 per month, and you can look at it like an insurance policy, at the end of the day. So happy to look at it depending on the use case. Greg, you're back.
Okay. I'm back. Great job, guys. Great questions in the chat. Yeah, as I mentioned, you can definitely reach out to either Thomas or Jeremy. I think the next click, there's like Jeremy's email, possibly not. But you'll get the recording afterwards, and you'll get an email from us so that you can have a direct conversation. And will somebody reach out if you have any questions to have a conversation. That's all we have for today. John, advancement of the care program. Yes, that's definitely one of the things that we talk about, and we can share more about what it includes, what it doesn't include. Happy to follow up afterwards. Oh, Adrian coming in. Is installing EV charging in a parking lot helpful with increasing overall paid parking revenue? That is a great question. Jeremy, you want to answer that one?
Absolutely. It can't hurt to install them, increase the revenue. Happy to help in any way.
Yeah, and we have a great blog about this, Adrian, on our website with a case study in Baltimore who did a very strategic approach to installing EV charging in their parking. And essentially, like what it does is there's 3 or 4 different ways which you can increase revenue by having charging. Like it's strategically, I remember they were doing stuff like leasing particular spots at a higher price. B, making sure it's on like PlugShare and the other websites where you can search for chargers. So it's just like a magnet, another marketing tool for them to choose you versus others. And then there's strategic ways that you can use those chargers if you have a good set of them. Things like with fleets in the area, like we have a partnership with Curo, C-U-R-O, where essentially our customers have now access to fleets and other companies who need dedicated charging spots in their city or otherwise. And so you can make some great revenue if you, for example, start with 20 chargers and don't need them all. There's several different buckets of revenue that you can create in addition to just the standard revenue you get from charging for parking. And Adrian, we have a team and a person, David Weber in the States, who's dedicated to supporting parking operators. And so if you're interested in having a conversation with David, more than happy to connect you. Paul, let me clarify. I understand your system can monitor loads, but I'm referring to active management, essentially a contractor that operates in the same way as the charger. If we're running out of time, let me know. Thomas, do you have any quick thoughts there, or we can always follow up with Paul afterwards?
Yeah, I can answer this. In terms of controlling non-EV charging loads, our solution doesn't operate in terms of being a contactor. We are running a few pilot projects in Connecticut right now where our load management system integrates with heat pumps. And so the thinking there is how can you have EV chargers and heat pumps play under the same service? So how do we manage those? But from our perspective, we're mainly just looking at devices that can be digitally managed, less so kind of the old school method of just shutting off power, because that's a whole other ballgame when it comes to safety and certifications.
Great. If there's no other lasting questions, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to everybody being part of this conversation. Keep the conversation going. If you have any questions, we're here. We're here to help, making sure you're making great decisions that are long-term, future-proofed, and not work. So otherwise, have a fantastic rest of the day.
All righty.
Thanks a lot.
Bye,
Thanks, everybody.